The waiter's eyes widened as he recognized me walking into Chez Laurent, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. "Mr. Chen," he whispered, barely containing his excitement. "Your usual table?" I nodded, watching as other diners craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the man whose food empire had just been featured on the cover of Forbes. 5 years ago, I was the family joke, the college dropout who chose a food truck over law school. They called me a disappointment, a waste of potential. My own father told our relatives I was playing with toys in the kitchen, while my cousins were becoming doctors and lawyers. Tonight, those same relatives were probably scrolling through social media, seeing the headlines about my restaurant chain's IPO. But I wasn't thinking about the $200 million valuation or the James Beard nomination. I was remembering a rainy Tuesday when everything changed, the day I decided to share my last meal with a stranger who looked hungrier than me. That stranger turned out to be Richard Blackstone, the reclusive billionaire investor whose Midas touch had created more millionaires than any other venture capitalist in New York. He was sitting alone in that dingy 24-hour diner, wearing a torn jacket, looking like he hadn't eaten in days. I had exactly $12 to my name and a container of leftover fried rice from my failed food truck. What happened next didn't just change my life, it exposed a family secret that had been festering for 20 years, turning our traditional Chinese-American family upside down. The same relatives who mocked my peasant work would soon discover that their golden boy, my seemingly perfect cousin, had been living a lie that made my food truck dreams look like Harvard ambitions. This is the story of how one act of kindness led to the most brutal family confrontation in Chinatown's Gold Mountain restaurant, where respect is measured in achievements and shame cuts deeper than any kitchen knife. Growing up in the Chen family meant living under the weight of unspoken expectations. My father, David Chen, immigrated from Guangzhou in 1985 with nothing but a textile engineering degree and dreams of American prosperity. He built our family's dry cleaning empire from a single storefront in Flushing, Queens, working 16-hour days until his hands were permanently stained with chemical residue. Our family gatherings happened every Sunday at my grandmother's house in Chinatown, a cramped apartment above her herb shop where the smell of ginseng and tiger balm mixed with the sound of Cantonese arguments. These weren't casual dinners. They were performance reviews disguised as family meals. My father would announce each cousin's achievements like quarterly earnings reports. Kevin got into Columbia Medical School, Linda passed the bar exam, Jessica's accounting firm landed 3 new Fortune 500 clients. Then came my turn. Silence. Awkward chopstick clicking against porcelain bowls. When I was 16, I made the mistake of bringing my girlfriend Sarah to Chinese New Year dinner. I'd been working part-time at a local restaurant, learning knife skills from the head chef after school. I was proud of my calloused hands and the speed I developed julienning vegetables. During dinner, my uncle loudly asked what my career plans were. "I want to be a chef," I announced, thinking my family would appreciate my passion for food. After all, cooking was central to our culture. The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. My father's face turned red with shame. "Chef is what you do when you can't do anything else," my aunt declared in Mandarin, not caring that Sarah couldn't understand. "We didn't come to America so our children could work in kitchens like peasants." My cousin Richard, 2 years older and the family's crown jewel, patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Don't worry, little cousin. You'll grow out of this phase. Not everyone can handle real pressure like pre-med." The adults nodded approvingly while I sat there, 17 years old, feeling like I'd just announced my intention to become a professional failure. Sarah never came to another family dinner. When I dropped out of NYU during my junior year to start my food truck, the family's disappointment crystallized into something harder, active embarrassment. My father stopped mentioning me in conversations with other Chinese parents. During my cousin Richard's medical school graduation party at the Golden Unicorn restaurant in Chinatown, I overheard my aunt telling someone I was the one with mental problems who thinks he's Gordon Ramsay. But Richard was different during private moments. While everyone else treated my food truck dreams like a contagious disease, he would secretly ask about my business. He seemed genuinely interested in my recipes, my profit margins, even my plans for expansion. He'd slip me cash for ingredients when my parents cut off my allowance. Keep following your passion, he'd whisper. I believe in you. I thought he was the only family member who understood me. What I didn't know was that Richard had been hiding his own secret, something so devastating that it would make my shameful career choice look like a minor family disagreement. While I was serving Korean-Mexican fusion tacos from a converted van in Brooklyn, Richard was maintaining an elaborate fiction about his medical career. The family's golden boy, the one they constantly compared me to, the future doctor who made my parents question where they went wrong with their younger son, he had a secret that would destroy everything. The truth about Richard would only surface months later, during the most humiliating family confrontation of my life. But first, I had to fail spectacularly enough to reach rock bottom. My food truck business was hemorrhaging money, my parents had cut off all support, and I was sleeping on friends' couches, surviving on leftover ingredients and pure stubbornness. That's when I met the stranger who would change everything. Comment below and let me know where you're watching this from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Whether you're in New York like me or somewhere completely different, I'd love to know your story. The invitation arrived on expensive cream cardstock with gold embossing, my cousin Richard's engagement party at the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was serving $8 tacos from a food truck with a broken generator, Richard was celebrating his engagement to Amanda Worthington, whose father owned half of Manhattan's medical buildings. You should come, my mother said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. Richard specifically asked for you to be there. Maybe seeing his success will inspire you to get serious about your life. 3 weeks before the party, my food truck business finally collapsed. A kitchen fire, caused by faulty wiring I couldn't afford to fix, destroyed everything. Insurance barely covered my debts. I found myself with exactly $47 in my bank account, sleeping on my friend Jake's couch in Astoria, and seriously considering my father's standing offer to come home and learn the dry cleaning business like a responsible adult. The night before Richard's party, I sat in Mel's diner on Queens Boulevard at 2 a.m., staring at a container of leftover fried rice, the last food I'd managed to save from my truck. I was debating whether to eat it or save it for tomorrow when an elderly man shuffled in, wearing a torn winter coat held together with safety pins. His shoes had holes, and his gray hair hung in greasy strands around his face. He sat 3 booths away, ordering nothing but coffee, hands shaking as he wrapped them around the warm mug. The night manager, a guy I knew from the neighborhood, kept shooting him dirty looks. I watched this man, probably in his 70s, trying to make 1 cup of coffee last all night to stay warm. Without thinking, I walked over. Excuse me, sir. I have this rice and I'm too full to finish it. Would you mind helping me out? His eyes, sharp blue eyes that seemed out of place in his weathered face, studied me carefully. You sure, son? Absolutely. I hate wasting food. We sat together for 2 hours. He introduced himself as Richard, coincidentally sharing my cousin's name. He spoke with a faint trace of a Boston accent and asked intelligent questions about my failed business. When I mentioned the engagement party, he listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for close friends. Family obligations can be brutal, he said, stirring his 3rd cup of coffee. Sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones who hurt us the worst. The next evening, I stood outside the Rainbow Room in my only suit, a black Joss Bank special I'd bought for job interviews 3 years earlier. The elevator ride to the 65th floor felt like ascending to judgment. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled below us like a circuit board, and I felt like the one broken connection threatening to short out the whole system. The party was everything I expected: ice sculptures, champagne fountains, and a string quartet playing near windows overlooking Central Park. My relatives clustered in their usual formations, the doctors discussing medical innovations, the lawyers debating recent Supreme Court cases, the business owners comparing profit margins. I felt like an anthropologist studying a culture I'd been exiled from. Richard looked perfect in his tailored tuxedo, Amanda radiant in a dress that probably cost more than my entire food truck. During his toast, he spoke about building a life of service and success, while his future father-in-law beamed with approval. The crowd of 200 guests, mostly medical professionals and Manhattan elite, hung on every word. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. My uncle grabbed the microphone for impromptu remarks about family achievements. He went down the list: Cousin Linda's partnership at her law firm, Cousin Kevin's residency at Mount Sinai, Cousin Jessica's expansion into corporate consulting. And of course, he continued, his voice carrying across the room, we're so proud of Richard, our future doctor, who's shown us what dedication and smart choices look like. His eyes found me in the crowd. Unlike some family members who think playing with food trucks is a career path. The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. I felt 400 eyes on me as my cheeks burned with shame. Amanda's parents whispered to each other, probably wondering what kind of family they were marrying into. Maybe little Marcus will figure it out someday, my aunt chimed in from her table. When he gets tired of living like a college student at 30. My father looked down at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. My mother forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Richard caught my gaze across the room and mouthed, I'm sorry, while shaking hands with well-wishers. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I was done being the family cautionary tale, done being the punchline to other people's success stories. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Time to turn the tables. Your friend from the diner. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything as I share these real stories with you. I stepped into the Rainbow Room's marble bathroom, hands shaking as I opened my email on my phone. The message was from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. About your cousin Richard, things you need to know. Attached were documents that made my world tilt sideways. Medical school transcripts showing Richard had been expelled in his second year for academic dishonesty. Bank statements revealing massive gambling debts. Most shocking of all, employment records showing he'd been working as a pharmaceutical sales rep for the past 3 years, not completing his medical residency like he'd told everyone. The man I'd shared my last meal with had somehow uncovered the truth about my family's golden boy. But how? What? I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, still processing what I'd discovered, when Richard himself walked in. His confident smile faltered when he saw my expression. Marcus? You look like you've seen a ghost, cousin. Funny you should mention ghosts, I said, holding up my phone. Want to tell me about Dr. Richardson? The one who doesn't actually exist. His face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have some very interesting documents here. About your pharmaceutical sales job. About your gambling debts. About how you've been lying to this family for 3 years while they held you up as the standard I could never reach. Richard grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. Marcus, please. You don't understand. I can explain everything. I just needed more time to figure things out. The family pressure, the expectations, you know how they are. Actually, I know exactly how they are, I said, pulling away from him. They've been using you as a weapon against me for years. Every family dinner, every gathering, why can't you be more like Richard? Well, turns out I've been more like Richard than anyone realized. What do you want? He whispered. Money? I can get you money. My sales commissions are actually pretty good, and Amanda's family, I want the truth. I cut him off. Tonight. In front of everyone. We walked back into the party together, Richard's face ashen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The celebration continued around us, champagne glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Amanda was showing off her engagement ring to a group of admirers near the ice sculpture. I made my way to where my uncle was holding court with other family members, their conversation a familiar symphony of achievements and disappointments. My father spotted me approaching and his expression shifted to that mixture of hope and dread he'd worn whenever I tried to assert myself at family events. Uncle, I said, my voice carrying more confidence than I felt. I have something to add to your speech about family achievements. The group turned toward me with barely concealed surprise. My aunt raised an eyebrow. Marcus, dear, we were just discussing Richard's medical career, I finished. Yes, I heard. Very impressive. Though I think there are some details everyone should know. Across the room, I saw Richard frozen near the champagne fountain, Amanda's hand on his arm as she noticed his sudden change in demeanor. The elderly man from the diner was nowhere to be seen, but somehow I felt his presence urging me forward. You see, I continued, my voice growing stronger, I've always wondered how Richard managed to balance his demanding residency schedule with all these family events. Most residents work 80-hour weeks, barely have time to sleep, let alone attend engagement parties. My uncle smiled condescendingly. Richard is exceptional. He manages his time well. That's one explanation, I said, pulling out my phone. Though the real explanation is much simpler. Richard doesn't have a demanding residency schedule because Richard isn't a resident. He was expelled from medical school 3 years ago for cheating on his boards. The conversation around us died like someone had flipped a switch. My uncle's smile faded. My aunt's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. What did you just say? My father asked quietly. I said the golden boy you've all been worshipping is a fraud. While you've been tearing me down for following my dreams, you've been celebrating someone living a complete lie. Richard appeared at my elbow, his face desperate. Marcus, please don't do this. Not here. Not like this. But I was done protecting other people's feelings at the expense of my own dignity. No, Richard. I think everyone deserves to know the truth. About your pharmaceutical sales job. About your gambling debts. About how you've been pretending to be something you're not while I got crucified for being exactly who I am. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Amanda's voice cut through it like a blade. Richard? Is this true? He looked around the room, at his fiancée's horrified expression, at our family's stunned faces, at the 200 guests who had come to celebrate his success. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator without saying a word. I watched him go, feeling no satisfaction, only emptiness. The truth was finally out, but the cost was higher than I'd expected. The silence in the Rainbow Room stretched for what felt like an eternity before chaos erupted. Amanda's scream pierced the air as she ran after Richard, her designer heels clicking frantically across the marble floor. Her father's voice boomed over the string quartet. What the hell kind of family are we dealing with here? My uncle grabbed my shoulder with a grip that would leave bruises. Do you have any idea what you've just done? He hissed in Mandarin. You've destroyed this family's reputation. Destroyed Richard's life. For what? Revenge. For truth, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Something this family seems allergic to. My aunt was crying into her napkin, muttering about face and shame in a mixture of Cantonese and English. Other relatives formed a tight circle around my parents, speaking in urgent whispers while shooting accusatory glances in my direction. The non-family guests stood frozen in uncomfortable clusters, unsure whether to leave or pretend nothing had happened. My father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How did you know? Before I could answer, a familiar voice behind me said, because I told him. I turned to see the homeless man from the diner, except he wasn't homeless anymore. Clean-shaven, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit, his gray hair now silver and styled, Richard Blackstone stood in the Rainbow Room like he owned it. Which, I would later learn, he essentially did. His investment firm held controlling stakes in half the businesses in Rockefeller Center. My uncle's jaw dropped. Who are you? Richard Blackstone, he said simply, extending his hand. And you must be the family that's been making this young man's life miserable. The name hit the room like a bomb. Even my tradition-bound relatives knew who Richard Blackstone was. His face had been on the cover of Fortune magazine just 6 months earlier. Amanda's father, who had been loudly questioning our family's integrity, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mr. Blackstone, my father stammered, I don't understand. How do you know Marcus? Your son shared his last meal with me when I needed it most, Blackstone said, his eyes scanning the room with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. I was going through a difficult period, testing some theories about human nature. Marcus didn't know who I was, didn't want anything from me, but he saw someone hungry and shared what little he had. He turned to address the room, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built empires. I've been watching your family dynamics for weeks, doing my research. It's fascinating how you've systematically destroyed one of the most naturally talented entrepreneurs I've encountered while elevating a fraud. My grandmother, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly stepped forward. At 86, she was the family matriarch, and when she spoke, people listened. "Mr. Blackstone," she said in careful English, "what do you mean about Marcus being talented?" Blackstone smiled. "I mean that his food truck concept, the one you all mocked, caught the attention of several major restaurant groups before his equipment failure. His Korean-Mexican fusion recipes are extraordinary. His business plan was solid. His only mistake was undercapitalization, something easily fixed with the right investor." He pulled out his phone and showed my grandmother something on the screen. "These are photos from when I visited his food truck incognito 3 months ago. The line stretched around the block. Food critics were starting to notice. Your grandson wasn't failing. He was on the verge of breakthrough success when circumstances beyond his control intervened." My mother, who had been crying silently, suddenly looked up. "Marcus? Is this true?" I nodded, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Food and Wine magazine was going to do a feature. I had meetings scheduled with investors. Then the fire happened and I lost everything. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked. "When?" I shot back, years of frustration finally erupting. Between uncle calling me a disgrace and aunt comparing me to Richard? When was I supposed to mention that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing? Blackstone continued, "The irony is that while you were all worshipping Richard's fake medical career, Marcus was building something real. Something that could have made this family genuinely proud if you'd bothered to pay attention." The revelation about Blackstone's identity had shifted the room's entire dynamic. Suddenly, family members who had spent years treating me like a failure were recalculating their positions. My uncle, who moments before had been furious, now approached me with careful deference. "Marcus," he said, "we didn't know. Maybe we were too hard on you." "Too hard?" I laughed bitterly. "You made me feel like a failure for following my passion while celebrating someone living a complete lie." Amanda reappeared, tears streaking her makeup, Richard nowhere to be seen. "He's gone," she announced to no one in particular. 3 years together, and I never knew who he really was. She walked over to where I stood with Blackstone. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. We all do. I used to think you were the family disappointment. Turns out, you were the only honest one in the room." The unexpected twist came from my grandmother, who had been quietly processing everything. She stepped forward and spoke in Mandarin, her voice carrying decades of authority. "Richard has shamed us all. But Marcus has shown honor, even when it was difficult. The family owes him a debt." She turned to Blackstone. "Sir, if you believe in my grandson's talent, what would you propose?" Blackstone's smile widened. "I propose we give Marcus what he's always deserved, real support. I'm prepared to invest $2 million in his restaurant concept, with the condition that he maintains creative control. No family interference, no second-guessing his vision." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, charged with possibility instead of tension. My father stepped forward, his face a mixture of shame and hope. "Sonnet, I don't know what to say. I've been wrong about everything." "Say you'll support me," I replied. "Say you'll trust me to know my own path, even when you don't understand it." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will. We all will." As the evening wound down and guests filtered out, some whispering about the dramatic revelations, others approaching me with newfound respect, I found myself standing by the windows overlooking Central Park. The city lights stretched endlessly in all directions, and for the first time in years, they looked like opportunities instead of barriers. Blackstone joined me at the window. "So, are you ready to show them what you can really do?" I thought about the long journey that had brought me to this moment. The years of doubt, the family shame, the failed food truck, the moment of kindness that changed everything. More than ready. 6 months later, Chen's Kitchen opened in Soho to rave reviews. The New York Times called it a masterclass in fusion cuisine from one of the city's most promising young chefs. The family now brags about my success with the same intensity they once used to tear me down. Richard eventually surfaced in California, working as a pharmaceutical sales rep under his real name, slowly paying off his debts. We've talked once since that night, a brief phone call where he apologized and thanked me for finally freeing him from a lie he'd been too scared to escape. Standing in my restaurant today, watching customers enjoy dishes born from recipes I developed in that cramped food truck, I often think about the power of a single moment of kindness. When I shared my last container of fried rice with a stranger in a Queens diner, I wasn't trying to change my life, I was just trying to be human. The greatest lesson from that night at the Rainbow Room wasn't about family dynamics or revenge or even success. It was about authenticity. For years, I let other people define my worth based on their narrow vision of achievement. I allowed their disappointment to become my shame, their expectations to overshadow my dreams. Richard's deception taught me something equally important. The pedestals we put people on often rest on foundations of sand. The cousin I envied, the perfect son I could never measure up to, was just as lost as I was, perhaps more so, because his path was built on lies while mine, however difficult, was built on truth. My relationship with my family has healed, slowly but genuinely. My father works part-time at the restaurant now, handling books and occasionally sharing stories with customers about his chef's son. My mother brings her friends for dim sum every Tuesday, beaming with pride as she introduces me to everyone who will listen. But the real victory isn't the restaurant's success or my family's newfound respect. It's the peace I feel knowing that I never compromised who I was, even when being myself felt like the hardest choice in the world. If you're watching this and feeling like the family disappointment, like your dreams don't fit their expectations, remember this: authenticity always wins in the end. It might take longer, it might hurt more, but living your truth is the only path to real fulfillment. The stranger who became my investor taught me that kindness has a way of circling back when you least expect it. But more importantly, he showed me that our lowest moments often prepare us for our greatest victories. Your dreams matter. Your path has value. And sometimes, the people who can't see your worth simply aren't meant to be your audience. Thanks for watching my story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming adversity. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when staying true to yourself led to unexpected rewards. Remember, your story matters too, and I'd love to hear it. Until next time, keep following your passion, keep being authentic, and never let anyone else define your worth.